Happy crypto arms race! It's Thursday. Welcome back to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. You almost think that I think about what I'm going to say before I say it.
Absolutely not. Never in your life.
Not usually, no. Sometimes I'm even surprised what actually comes out of my mouth. But it's Thursday. It's your favorite day, crypto arms race. So I won't take up any more airtime. What are we talking
Thank
about?
goodness for once. It is crypto arms race, and Mr. Producer put together a really cool brief for us that involves a lot of what's going on in Africa. We're going to talk about Ripple and CBDCs a little bit, but we're a little bit broken record about that. It's more just an update about how Ripple continues to proliferate the world. But then we are going to talk about Kenya and what Kenya is doing to make sure that they aren't left behind within the African blockchain ecosystem. That's pretty cool. And we get to talk about the states a little bit. You know, BlackRock is all over crypto Twitter today. And we'll talk about the Clarity Act and how the Clarity Act is being responded to within Asia itself as well. We'll talk a little bit about Hong Kong and what they're up to, but a lot of it is conjecture. So this is just a reminder to DYOR. We'll talk about India and some scams that are going on, but then we're going to end on the positive note of Istanbul and all of the wild events that are going on in the next week.
Any over-under on whether we get through all of that? Seems like a lot. We could try.
How long do you have?
I've got as long as we need. Quick reminder before we...
He said.
Quick reminder, yeah. Quick reminder, we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the major venues, so like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. Also, shout out to Binky.
I like those.
It's my superhero outfit. I'm kind of like Spider-Man, you know, just take off the work clothes and boom, superhero. Anyways, at first when I took the shirt out of the bag, I didn't really like it, but I
like it. I like the black on black Tears on a River.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, and mainly because everything I wear often is black. Works out well. So anyways, shout out to Becky and my partners and good friends there. And let's freaking go. All right, we're back.
You know, about every 70 episodes, our designer gifts us a new video. So we're due for one.
I was going to say, we didn't get a new one. I didn't see it.
Yeah, it'll be in about December if we're going every 70 episodes. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm excited for a new video. That's probably all he's been doing is working on that video for the last 78 days.
Yeah, probably. That's really, it's really official.
All right.
We're going to talk about Ripple. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Ripple is continuing to expand. They are continuing to expand in Africa. They're continuing to support cross-border payments. It's very exciting. They are now working with the UK company PayAngel. They're working with the Gulf Cooperation Council. They're called People, I think, PYYPL. And they're working with Australia's Zazi Transfer for remittance and business payments. So this is not, you know, CBDC territory necessarily, but this is Ripple continuing to onboard more and more companies, more and more small, medium businesses. But they also are now working with Afrique, who serves 400 million mobile wallets, primarily in Africa. And they are now working with the National Bank of Georgia for cross-border payments. And they've been approved by the Dubai Financial Services Authority. So if you're holding XRP, you're probably having a real good day.
Probably feeling pretty good about yourself. I mean, regardless of my... Wow, that was super loud. What the hell was that? Regardless of my opinion on CBDCs, which we have made pretty clear many times, I mean, from a purely business perspective, this is an incredibly smart move, in my opinion. Because it's not always about what we want to happen, it's what's going to happen. And whether we don't want any quasi-centralized or, you know, regulated products being the end game of remittance and transfers, it's probably how it's going to be. So good on Ripple for not necessarily doing what's, you know, the OGs of the space think is critical, but rather making incredibly smart business decisions, in my opinion. So I think this is really good. I sure hope it doesn't evolve into CBDCs, but I mean, Ripple's doing the smart thing here. There's not much competition with them right now, if any, really, for And they're taking a fairly concerted approach across many jurisdictions globally. So pretty exciting. I can't remember what the what the amount lost to remittance fees I'd seen the statistic a little while ago, but it's a lot. Like it's like hundreds of billions a year is just in remittance fees of money going back to African nations from family members elsewhere. And that's insane. Like they're already disadvantaged in Africa in many, many ways. Access to the internet, access to technology, running water, et cetera, et cetera. And like taking more money out of their pockets because you can is crazy. Like the TransUnion thing and the MoneyGram, like that has always been insane to me how they can even get away with that. So this is huge. I like to see this just from a societal good perspective. I think it's super important, but from a business perspective, it'll be insanely lucrative if they continue this path. So good for
Ripple's also doing a fantastic job because they aren't looking at this as a single arm, right? They look at it as their own products. They look at it as international licensing for their own products. Yeah. They look at serving small, medium enterprises, and they look at serving governments, and they look at serving banks. So they are going to corner this market from all sides, right?
Well, and it's really
going to have competition from somebody, trying to serve SMEs because they're the ones serving them, and the government and the banks.
Yeah, they. I think it's smart personally. Like I think it's a good business strategy for them to just take on as much as they possibly can in this market, because so many participants are shying away from it because there's a sentiment issue with moving towards regulation. And so Ripple's just diving right in. They do have some economies of scale. Like obviously this is, again, from a macro business perspective, I think smart. They're building these partnerships that in this particular case, is to service Africa. But a lot of these partnerships, some of them, the Gulf, whatever that was, Australia, like that's opening the doors for a lot of other pathways to remittance from different countries to different countries. I think it'll be kind of exponential in terms of how quickly this can expand once they get critical mass, I think.
Absolutely. There's also kind of a numbers game here. Like a quick Google of the population of Africa says that in 2016, combined census data said there are approximately 1.2 billion people across Africa.
Yeah.
So with Ripple working with On Afrique, having 400 million mobile wallets, that's still a pretty small fraction. Also, probably the majority of people who've been onboarded to crypto so far in Africa. And so I think that the partnership decisions that they're making are not only very
they're immediately at the forefront of the consciousness. Markets. Yeah. No, I think it's really smart. It's very strategic. They're not slouches. Obviously, they've been around for a long time and had plenty of time to think about how to approach this. And they have really, really, really deep pockets, which is critical for this type of mass expansion. So all in all, I'm a big fan.
I think it's exciting to see this, but I like talking about Africa right now because typically we've been talking about Nigeria, what they're doing with the CBDC. We talk about Uganda. We talk about kind of the same nations again and again, South Africa being part of BRICS. But we're seeing Kenya really start to take the reins and poise themselves to be really, really relevant within the blockchain ecosystem. I think this is super interesting. A while ago, we talked about Kenya testing out some things with digital ID. We're going to get into that in a second. But what's really unique about what Kenya is doing is instead of the government writing bills about crypto, is they've actually asked the Blockchain Association of Kenya to draft the asset service providers bill for basically all of blockchain regulation. What does it mean to be regulated? What does it mean to be licensed? What does that structure look like? How are we going to manage digital assets? And so actually letting the experts make those bills as opposed to making something up and then hoping that it works is a really unique way to go about this for a government. And I'm impressed to see it, but it's a pretty tight deadline. So the government of Kenya has told them that they have 2 months to get this in order, and then they will enact it right away because they're worried about being left behind in terms of the blockchain ecosystem in Africa.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the options that actually exists in North America too, just nobody ever talks about it. Effectively what this is, and it's not the same, it's not apples to apples, but effectively what this is its own self-regulatory organization that was established to oversee crypto. It's unofficial that it's the Blockchain Association of Kenya that is that self-regulatory organization, but a parallel in North America is FINRA. FINRA in America is an SRO that manages broker-dealers and exchange licensing and so on, which is under the ultimate purview of the SEC, but it is a standalone SRO that can make decisions. That was an option, and I think that was an option in North America and many other Western jurisdictions that we all probably would have preferred, because it would have been a clean slate, would have been, none of the round hole square peg thing at the beginning, which is kind of what we're dealing with right now with all these different bills everywhere, trying to figure out how to make it all fit under and adapt current regulation. So, I mean, I think this is actually a really viable option. I like it. I'm with you, because I think, who better to have, well, it's kind of like the fox running the hen house sometimes, though. Like you kind of have to be a little bit careful, and that you have to have a lot of trust and respect for whoever that SRO is, and there needs to be accountability. But to me, this is super important. Now, I mean, the counter example in North America is, the Senate hearings and the House Financial Service Committee hearings and all this other shit is where they're supposed to get information from experts. Unfortunately, in America, it's just political showboating. They're all standing on their soapbox yelling a bunch of shit, and it's very rarely actually to get to the bottom of the issue, but rather to either embarrass or the whoever's being interviewed, or to make some sort of political statement, take a political stand. It's always nonsense. So I like this. I think this is great. I hope we see more of it.
I'm really impressed with Kenya so far. They also only have a 3% tax on crypto transfers. So keep that in mind if you're looking for somewhere to operate out of. Now, the other thing that they're doing in terms of blockchain, which isn't crypto specific, is their digital ID. So we heard about this a little bit before. They were testing it with particular youth groups, that kind of thing. They are actually rolling out their full digital ID system in December 2023. So they already have something called Maisha Namba, which is like our social security numbers or SIN numbers or what have you. I think this is a pretty standard thing for countries to have. It helps you access your medical records. It helps you access your financial records, that kind of thing. It's not that out there, but they are putting this now on chain. And so your full ID in Kenya will be on chain, which is pretty cool. And they're also petitioning private businesses to try innovative solutions to use the digital ID. So theirs is a little bit more integrated, I want to say, where in Canada you have a healthcare number and a social insurance number and a this number and a that number. In Kenya, it's all one number. And I both like and don't like this. I like it because it's like, oh, here's a really unique way to look at your identity. Your identity will be seamless. It will be digital. It will be yours. You will technically own it. But also, if everybody has access to everything that you're doing and we want to inject commerce into that, it could get a little bit dangerous. So
yeah, I think there's probably going to have to be some obfuscation of some metadata. Like there's going to have to be some privacy circuits in there somehow. I think this is really interesting. Identification in the emerging markets is always an issue. Access to identification and consistent, like many people in emerging markets don't have passports, don't have ID, don't have bank accounts. Like it's one of the huge problems that kind of plagues society at large, I think. And so we spend a lot of time, and this is one of the things that brought me into the space, was really just the meaningful additional applications and use cases of the technology, and how it can really make life better globally. But we get stuck often on the speculation, on the, whatever the prevailing narratives are around AI, around price volatility, around, we're going to talk about ETH and BTC a little bit today. Like there's a lot of the narrative somehow gets focused on those types of things. This is actually one of the greatest impact for greatest number opportunities, is offering identification to many of the 1.2 billion people in Africa that are without identification. It comes with it some other challenges, privacy, theft. Like there's a lot of unknown risk vectors still with this, but I'm sure, with enough safeguards and a little bit of centralization at first, obviously, they'll be able to protect against that as they go. To me, this is huge. This is one of those stories that, it might not turn into any like meaningful numbers on our bank accounts for any of us, but it's a huge impact globally.
It's an actual use case of people actually using it and being onboarded without realizing.
And there's so many things you can do with this type of ID. Obviously, we saw a little bit of it at the end of the last cycle with all these soul-bound NFTs and NFTs giving you real life access to different things and tickets for different things and all this stuff. Loyalty programs can all be managed probably under the same identification that follows you everywhere globally. Because in terms of integrating and building additional products, there's a lot of automation, I'm sure, that you can build in. Another cool thing, kind of tangential to this, but there's we have season tickets for the Florida Panthers, which is the hockey team here. And they have these concessions that if you've registered, you just walk in, you grab your stuff and you walk out and it charges you. And there's like Amazons and Whole Foods and other stores that are kind of doing this stuff now. There's a lot of really cool applications of this. And I think often as a space, we don't talk enough about it. We talk about who's going to turn 1,000 into 1,000,000 with a 0.0001% probability like that. But that's what the prevailing narrative often is, rather than what actual value are we providing? Is this making a difference for people? And if it is, we need to double down. This is one of those examples. I like it.
Okay, before we leave Kenya, I need to note, although this isn't new news, that their central bank has stated several times, primarily over the summer, that they do not believe that they will need a CBDC. They believe that the current blockchain ecosystem offers enough solutions for them to have alternative currency. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a really good move for Kenya. We see that they are not only taking the reins in terms of digital identity, but also they want to move forward, be at the forefront, be the crypto hub, if you will, within Africa. They are actively competing with other nations within Africa, and they don't want to introduce a CBDC. They are, I'm so impressed.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a distraction, but I think there are many viable paths that don't include CBDCs. I think there's many ways to protect your monetary policy from unnecessary influence due to digital assets relative to your fiat assets. There's many things that we can do to protect that relationship, I think, rather than acquiesce and give all control to the government. So hopefully we see more of these kind of siloed experiments, so to speak, where they're saying, hey, we're a country that clearly could implicate a CBDC, but we're not going to because there's maybe a better way to do it. Let's try it. Yeah. And hopefully the rest of the world pays attention.
All right, over to America. JD, what did BlackRock do?
So this morning I couldn't figure out what on earth was driving all this market movement. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's pretty rare that like a random Thursday you don't hear anything and Bitcoin's up, $2,000 and ETH is skyrocketing. Everything on my screen is just like green. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So anyways, a few days before BlackRock issued their application for the Bitcoin spot ETF, they did they had to register the trust first. So you have to have an entity that is going to be the one on the application. Well, they have now filed an entity named BlackRock Advisors, and its focus being ETH, ETF. And so, as you could imagine, with all of the speculation around the Bitcoin ETFs being unavoidable from an approval perspective, there's as much speculation now that the ETF for Ethereum should follow generally in that same category. I'm not sure I agree. I think they've drugged their feet on Bitcoin for this long, and Bitcoin still is considerably larger and less volatile even than Ethereum. So we'll see. We'll have to see what happens, but this is a good sign. Everybody obviously got excited. And then, as is almost always the case, whales made money and dumped. Omega dumped on everybody, and we're back to about where we started the day, if not lower, which is awesome. But, this is again, we're starting to see more and more signals that, okay, like BlackRock's taking it seriously, TradFi's taking it seriously, regulators have no choice but to start taking it seriously. If we're waiting for the straw that breaks the camel's back, we got to be getting close because there's a lot of straws stacked on there lately. So super excited about BlackRock's surprise. It's like the worst kept secret ever. All of the crypto Twitter knew about it within about 10 minutes. That's it. That's all I have to say about that. Obviously, I'm bullish. This is somewhat surprising. Larry Fink talked a lot about Bitcoin in his last investor letter and has been a big Bitcoin fan, but has been a fairly outspoken critic of almost every other asset.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what the 180 is from a PR perspective here, because he has, in fact, shit on Ethereum quite a bit in the past. So we'll have to see how they twist that around. But anyways, I kind of like it. Instead of, calling him out, which I am, but not that he's going to hear about it. I don't mind it. It just shows, the progression of the space. Yeah. At one time, I thought bald was ridiculous, but I didn't have a choice but to accept it when my hair decided otherwise. So, you have to learn and be willing to adapt and admit your errors. And I think BlackRock didn't accidentally become the largest asset manager in the world. Yeah. They're probably not a bunch of slouches. And this is just another example of that, my opinion.
It's funny you say that we should learn to adapt, because I'm wondering how you feel about the Clarity Act. Sometimes I feel that these types of acts look as though they are trying to protect the public, but in reality are...
It's virtue signaling.
It's just reactionary when they don't know what's going to happen. It's protectionist in a place that we maybe don't need to be. So the first time that we heard of the Clarity Act, just to be clear, remember when TikTok got banned for government employees?
Yeah,
that was Clarity Act. Now we are not allowed to engage with government officials are not allowed to engage with Chinese crypto companies, and they are trying to get rid of Target's iFinex, which is the head of Tether. Not only for government, but just in America generally. Okay, for clarity, the Clarity Act is creating legal accountability for rogue innovators and technology. The reason that I don't like this, the reason that I'm immediately skeptical, is who decides what a rogue innovator is? And how far are we all from being rogue innovators?
So the answer to both of those questions is it's arbitrary. And we're probably all one pen stroke away from being violating this act. So exactly. The original intention of this, I think, was actually probably correct, in that we've obviously got a tech standoff with China. We're losing a lot of our intellectual property via the university systems, via moles, via investment. China has made sizable investment in North American tech companies. Much of that has now had to be rolled back. That there's certain applications and certain reporting that you have to do if you have certain foreign governments or certain foreign officials. That's why you do PEP screening, politically exposed persons. We do that for everything, when we sell tokens, when we sell equity, when whatever. Even for users on many protocols, you have to ensure that they're not politically exposed. Anyways, all of that to say, I think an act like this, the intention was good, but to your point, without clear boundaries and guidelines, it's all just subjective. And it's worth noting, this isn't just for blockchain. Yeah. This is for many different forms of technology. This article just was from a blockchain perspective. So it's not like they're singling out blockchain technologies. Anyways, why do I think this is essentially a giant joke? And that's because insider trading and government access to said insider information is very prevalent in the US government. Like it's not even it's like the worst kept secret that all of these lawmakers and policymakers and people in government are involved in tons of backroom deals and lobby deals, and they know and make investment decisions very eerily accurate all the time. Like they're always buying before a big announcement. They're always selling before something devastating. So this to me is just a bait and switch. Oh, look, we're protecting against Chinese government officials. But what about our own? It's ridiculous. I think this whole thing is ridiculous. If we're going to clamp down on it, let's actually clamp down on it. Let's be consistent across all.
Let's have it be meaningful. And also the other reason I don't like this is that Asia is doing exactly the opposite thing. So as you said, there's brain drain to different parts of Asia. There's brain drain, a lot of it to Hong Kong, Singapore. And that means there's also money drain. And when we see different parts of Asia, such as Hong Kong, look at approving crypto ETFs really quickly, we see America or North America falling behind faster and faster. When we see Singapore grant licenses to blockchain and Ripple and Binance and whoever else, we see America fall behind and not be able to engage on the world stage. And Asia is like, I don't think that they're upset that the Clarity Act exists, because it just kind of makes them look better.
It gives them another additional advantage. And I mean, to your point again about the lack of clarity or just how loose the language is, that's another problem, because with such loose language, there's a lot of arbitrary debates that have to happen and it slows things down. Like, we already have an incredibly bloated bureaucracy. If you make it very complicated and confusing, that makes things even worse. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty obvious contrast right now between the approaches of many Western jurisdictions, but namely the United States versus, Africa, Europe, Asia, pretty much everywhere else. Essentially, the US sucks. We're like the only country that's really meaningfully sucking at this. Everybody else seems to be at least trying.
Arguably, actually, India is sucking worse. And part of why I say that is that India, less than a year ago, like, we were already doing this show, was making statements about how they were not going to regulate crypto and how they thought it was all awful. And if you participated, it was on you, and they're not involved in it. But they're also part of BRICS. And the rest of BRICS doesn't feel that way. So India, without any other announcement, has decided that they are, in fact, cracking down in terms of legality on crypto. And this isn't regulation, but they are starting to involve themselves in scams. So a $300 million crypto scam has seen about 100,000 people be arrested.
I think it was 100,000 people be scammed. 5,000.
Oh, I thought it was the opposite. I thought it was so many people were arrested.
Yeah, no. I think those are the people.
18 people were arrested, including 14.
4 police officers. Yeah.
My bad. Cool. I was like, how are so many people involved in this?
Yeah, no. Those are the victims, and then 18 individuals, including police officers. And the point there is that, in the absence of regulation, guidelines, rules, then often people will start to establish and maintain their own unspoken rules. And in many cases, some bad shit can happen. This is an example of it. I mean, the India FUD today kind of reminds me of China FUD of yesterday.
Totally.
We've been talking about India banning, unbanning, loving, hating crypto for as long as I can remember. They are members of BRICS. 300 million is a lot. They're probably also concerned about their currency at the moment and inflation and their economy. And so they're probably also concerned about its impact on their monetary policy. But being concerned when you're a country of over 1 billion people and a very big piece of the world population doesn't mean you just do nothing, which is the lesson that the US needs to learn too. Just because you don't get it, or you're nervous, or you can't just sit on your hands and hope for the best. Because
it's like mom and dad telling you they're worried but not picking you up from the party. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, what's the freaking point then? So, anyways, India, obviously huge potential. We don't talk about it much or focus on it much because they are so flip-floppy. Exactly what they're trying to avoid. We are the type of people that they should want to try to attract. Builders, right? We're the type of people that they should want. But instead, we're just not looking at it because it's too hard to understand. And that's the exact opposite of what they want to do. And the same thing, I think the same thing or something similar is happening in the US.
Absolutely. I was going to say Turkey is doing almost exactly the opposite, where they are cracking down really hard, but they also are being very vocal about it. So they see that there are concerns and they are acting in those concerns. They are trying to gain parliamentary approval from the Financial Action Task Force. They needed to meet 40 standards by them, and they've met 39. This is a pretty big deal because a lot of these do impact the crypto scene, probably in a negative way. But it doesn't seem to matter because the next thing we'll talk about is how many crypto events are happening in Istanbul in the next week. So,
yeah. So one of the big problems is there's been a lot of suspected concerning transactions that flow through Turkey. And so what they're trying to do now to bring legitimacy to the crypto markets is to say, hey, get us off this gray list that says we suck for money laundering and terror financing. What do we have to do to achieve that? And once they can get out of that money laundering and terror financing umbrella, then the theory is that they can build a much more legitimate and successful industry. I do kind of agree with that. I don't mind crackdowns. Like, I think in many ways, this isn't necessarily bad for the space. It might feel that way because it'll create new requirements for people. But I think all in all, it's good. It brings more transparency and confidence in the space. I mean, I don't have a huge opinion on Turkey in general. It's a fairly small country, but again, You know, I don't mind if they're broadcasting where they're going to be enforcing in advance.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that be kind of neat?
What a novel concept.
Like, if they were just saying,
communicating your expectations. Weird.
If they just said in very certain terms, even in the US, if they just said, hey, like even without a legislation, if someone just said, hey, we are now acting as if these are all securities until we're told otherwise. If they just came out and definitively said that and said, and we're cracking down on any violations to our Securities Act based on that assumption. And then we would all have to say, okay, let's react, like let's get the fuck out, or let's come into compliance or do whatever. But instead what happens is you get a subpoena to come in for more information, which then ends generally in a fine and or a lawsuit. Like that doesn't allow the industry to emerge and evolve with you. It's a very strange, it's a very strange interaction here in the US in particular. It seems almost confrontational with the regulators that are supposed to be encouraged to grow the space, whatever the space is. So anyways, I don't mind this. I think this is, again, another maybe good example. The more of these transitions that we see, I think the better. It just gives more insight into where things can go wrong, how to protect ourselves as a space against it. I mean, let's go.
It also allows people, it gives people guidelines in how they can operate. And we're seeing that in motion because despite there being maybe some FUD, maybe some negativity for crypto in Turkey because they are trying to comply with all of these standards, we also are going to see a bunch of our friends are in Istanbul for the next week because we have Arbitrage Scanner has a super intimate event. We have Avalanche House. We have Crypto Stake at the Staking Rewards Summit. We have ETH 2030, and all of these are being hosted in Turkey.
And DeFiCon.
DeFiCon, that's right.
Yeah, I'm super jealous. I don't know how somehow I ended up not going to this one because it's like a convergence of a bunch of conferences, all of which are relevant to me.
It's so good.
And I've wanted to go to Istanbul forever. And I missed the boat entirely, mainly because I was in Canada for a month and the thought of traveling for another 2 weeks was maybe not super exciting, but kind of jealous about everybody being in Turkey. A lot of our partners and friends are there. So hopefully everybody has a lot of fun. That's about all we have to say about that. Have fun.
That's the crypto arms race.
Have fun. Don't rub it in. I don't want to see photos. I don't want to hear how awesome things were.
Send them. I'll show them on the show.
If anything, I just want to hear how shitty it was so that I don't feel bad. Okay, we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Most often it's the two of us, but every now and then we have some guests, especially in the next couple weeks. Kiara is going AWOL. I guess you technically have leave, so it's not AWOL on those days. But you have a few days in November, I think, that you're away, and we've got guests that are always a lot of fun. So super excited to have everybody on. Today, with that, I say to you, Kiara, go find yourself.
Go find yourself.
Bye.